Live from Ron's Pizza in Bell Fountain, it's time for Chalk Talk. And now, here is your host, Don Hensley.
Hello, and welcome to Chalk Talk on this fine Wednesday afternoon, evening. Tonight I've got a couple special guests. In the second half of the show, we'll be joined by Matt Comstock, the athletic director at Bell Fountain High School, to talk about the state of high school athletics in Ohio. But first, I'm joined tonight by Jason Wish. Jason, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
So before we get into this, because you've got a really unique background, taking kind of outdoors, being an outdoorsman to a whole new level, but give us a little background about yourself.
Sure. I'm 49 years old. I was born and raised here just north of Bell Fountain on the family farm, and went to Calvary Christian Elementary, graduated from Bell Fountain High School in '92, got a degree in animal science from Ohio State University, and met my wife my freshman year of college, even though we knew each other in high school. We've been together for 30 years, and we're actually going to be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary here in 2 months. So
good for you. We talk about being an outdoorsman, and I think people think about being a hunter or maybe, getting into backpacking or kayaking, which you do all of the above. But let's start by talking about something called the fastest known time. So when I looked you up on the internet, I was shocked to find out that you had covered the Shaltowee Trace Trek, 343 miles through deep hemlock gorges, piney, craggy summits, and you completed it in 7.5 days. So 343 miles in 7.5 days, that's about 50 miles a day.
Right. So, let me start by saying that I am by no means an expert in FKTs, which is fastest known times. For those of you watching that don't know what an FKT is, it's basically just a speed record on a trail. And they can be on circuit hikes like a loop or an end-to-end, an out and back. It can even be on roads. So there's trails all over the world that these FKTs are done on. And I just, like we were talking beforehand here, I just discovered what FKTs were and got into backpacking just like 6 or 7 years ago. So I haven't been doing that for this long. And I guess the Shaltowee holds a special place in my heart because it was my first long trail. I consider that kind of a long trail, 350 miles.
Yeah. Most
people probably consider long trails like the Appalachian Trail, the PCT, or the CDT, the ones that are thousands of miles long. But for me, as a beginner backpacker, 350 miles was pretty long, and I wanted to not only complete that through hike, I wanted to see how fast I could do it. And I'd recently found out what FKTs were, and I thought I could possibly set a fastest known time on that trail, and I was successful. And it has since been beaten, by the way. Last fall, it was defeated. So I do have a little part of me that maybe wants to go back out there and try it again, possibly this October.
So I don't know if I've walked 350 miles in my life, much less than 7 days. So what made you to decide to do this? Were you just looking it up on the internet and thought, hey, this might be something I'm going to try to break?
Well, I guess it probably all started with it was kind of a progression. I started backpacking in 2016, and I thought I would film my adventures. That's actually how I kind of got started into YouTube. I'd watched some other YouTubers showcasing the trails they were hiking on, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to do that same thing. I can showcase the trails I'm hiking on, maybe for others to see the details of the trail if they would like to go there, or even for people that can't get out on the trail, they can kind of live vicariously through watching others on trails. Right. Through YouTube. So after about 1.5 years of doing some solo trips and some group trips with other YouTubers in Ohio, I noticed that I would often hike a little faster than others and in the group. And I actually had one of them say, you know what, you should do an FKT sometime. I was like, well, what's that? So I looked it up and instantly was hooked with the idea of attempting an FKT. So that's kind of how it all started.
So how do you train for something like that?
Lots and lots of walking and running. It depends on what style of FKT. So there's 3 styles of FKTs. The one that I attempted first was a self-supported. So when you do a self-supported FKT, you can put out food resupply bags ahead of time at designated spots along the trail where you think you might need resupplied. You're allowed to stop at gas stations. You can sleep at a motel. You're basically allowed to do anything that anyone else has available to them as well if they were to go to try to beat your record.
Okay.
So you have to carry a pack because you're still, you're usually camping out. and you're going to be carrying most of your food. Now, the other style that I just recently did this last year, or it was 2 years ago now, was unsupported. You have no outside help whatsoever, so you have to start and finish with everything in your back. So your backpack's really heavy. So training for one of those is basically just training with a loaded pack, lots of walking, and there's a skill set involved with this because not anybody could just go out there and do this without planning all the little details about what's in your pack, from having, a first aid kit to having a tracking device to track your mileage and to be able to prove that you did this. There's just a whole lot, that goes into it. Are you going to cook your food every night? Are you going to just eat bars every night or cold soak your food? There's so many backpacking, a lot of skills from backpacking that go into an unsupported style, and that kind of played into my favor because I backpacked for so many years before attempting an unsupported style. Now, before we move on, let me quickly mention what a supported is. A supported would be like what they do in a marathon.
Okay.
They have aid stations every 5 miles, for example, and the ultra racing that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. That is a supported style. So it's basically just a runner running down the trail. They don't even have to carry anything if they don't want, but they usually have maybe a running vest with some flasks of electrolyte drinks or snacks or something on them, but they have a crew that can help them get down the trail as fast as possible.
So the 343-mile trail that you were on, was that supported, or what style was that?
So I've done it twice. The first time was self-supported, and then that one was defeated. So I took a year off and then came back and went for it unsupported, and I got it. That has since been beat. And then just this past fall, a lot of people don't know about this unless they watch my YouTube videos or follow me on Facebook. I did attempt a supported. I wanted to try to be able to say that I held the Shelteau H Race FKT in all 3 categories. And I made it 2 days in. I did a 65-mile day and a 47-mile day, and it just started cut loose raining. I was running through mud and slop and rain, and then there was a cold front coming in and with sleet and snow, and I just felt like we were a little underprepared for that rain and that cold, and I didn't want to put my crew at risk or myself, and we decided to pull the plug on day 2. I was a third of the way through the trail, way ahead of any record that had been set on the trail. So I feel like I have unfinished business out there.
Okay.
Because of that, I really want to go back and try it one more time.
So just to be clear for everybody, you did the 350-mile one with no support, just you and a backpack.
Yeah, and all my food.
So tell me what you got in the backpack. How heavy is it, and what are you carrying?
Well, the backpack, I use a lot of ultralight gear. So people in the backpacking community will know what ultralight means. It's just your base weight, your main part of your gear that's not counting consumables like food and fuel and the clothes on your body is under 10 pounds. However, on an unsupported, you can't stash food resupplies. So I had to pack like 20 pounds of food in my backpack. So my backpack was pushing 40 pounds, I think, at the beginning of this, and it really took a toll on my feet. It was a very, very painful experience.
I can imagine. You're talking to a guy here that's never backpacked, obviously. But I can't. Do you have just one pair of shoes? I mean, do you have multiple pairs of shoes with you? I mean,
on the unsupported, yeah, one pair of shoes, because I can't make a resupply bag with extra shoes or socks down the trail. So if you walk through creeks or get your feet wet or muddy, you got to live with it. You walk until they dry out. Now, on the supported style or a self-supported, you could put out a new pair of shoes for every day. You could change your shoes 5 times a day if you want, if you had the crew and the amount of shoes to turn over during your hike.
So do you take the time to look at the beauty around you, or are you pretty just focused on, like, navigating through the trail?
A little bit of both, I would say. I mean, I really enjoy being outside in God's creation and just enjoying the beauty that He's given us to enjoy on the trail. But at the same time, if you're moving quick, you got to pay attention to where your feet are at and not trip over rocks and roots, because that can put it into your attempt. If you stub your toe real hard and break your toe, it can be over. So you definitely got to be focused on what you're doing.
So you told me something before we came on that that shocks me, and so I want to ask you this. If just from what you said already, I would guess that most people would be thinking that you've been running or some kind of an elite athlete almost your whole life, but you started out as a runner in high school, but then talk about the break that you took.
Yeah. So I ran cross country starting in 8th grade. Well, even further back than that, my mom used to take me to 2-mile road races when I was like 7, 8 years old. And I guess I liked it. I can't remember. I think I liked it. I did pretty good. And in eighth grade, I was really good. I actually had a couple records at Bell Fountain Middle School that lasted for a couple years. And then in high school, I never improved. So I never even made varsity. I ran freshman, sophomore, junior year, trained for my senior season, and then I burned out and got sick of running, and I quit and said, I'm done running. I'm never going to run again.
How long did that last?
That lasted almost 30 years. I don't know. I'm ballpark 30 years. So in 2016, I picked it back up with backpacking only. I wasn't going out there to run. I was just wanting to enjoy a solo backpacking trip, get away from the farm, get away from everything, just enjoy nature and relax. And that's the way it was for the first year. And then I started backpacking further. I guess it fulfilled a competitive desire that's always been part of me. You know, as we were talking about briefly before the show, I always was racing the neighborhood kids who could race through the woods the quickest on their motorcycle, climb the tree the fastest, who could climb the highest, who could run around the field the quickest. We had all kinds of records, you know, in our family farm with the neighborhood kids. So I always had this competitive drive. And cross country, I guess, didn't fulfill that. But this is now. I really like to see how far and fast I can get. If there's a backpacking loop and I only got 2 days to complete it, and most people take 4, you know, I only have 2 days available, I might try to go out there and complete it in 2 days.
So do you backpack now leisurely, or is it just competitively?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. Everybody who follows me on Facebook and YouTube thinks I'm this one-dimensional, extreme endurance, crazy guy out there backpacking 50 miles a day and kayaking full blast day in and day out. You know, I like to enjoy a leisurely trip with the guys and soak it all in, take my chair and sit around the campfire and relax and talk. And same on the kayak. I like to kayak on rivers, let the river do the work. I'm just there to relax and recover and rejuvenate and get back to the farm.
So you took the long hiatus from running, but when you decided to get back into running, you really got back into running. So you've completed 50K races, you've completed 50-mile races. Talk a little bit about what it takes to run 50 miles in a race.
Oh my gosh. I went into that race probably a little underprepared, just because when you train for something that long of a distance, you need to at least walk or run maybe close to that distance, but at least once a week. Not every day. You know, right now I'm currently training maybe 8 miles, 4 days a week, and then I try to put in one 12 to 15 mile day once a week, and I usually take 2 days off each week. The 50 miler, that was actually part of my training for my running attempt on the Sheltowee Trace. It was like my last training session. So I really wanted to get that 50-mile day in. But for training for that, just being consistent. You know, I hit the weights 4 or 5 days a week, and I'm always, even working around the farm, I'm putting in 10 or 15,000 steps every day, just working on my vegetable farm. So I think that also lends to helping me be in shape and be prepared for these even though I might be undertrained according to some people by looking at my miles I'm putting in, I'm still getting the footsteps in that I need to be ready for something like that.
So just to be clear, 50 miles is like running from here to Columbus.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was brutal. Yeah, that was brutal. And it was I don't know if you're familiar with Shawnee State Forest in southeast Ohio near Portsmouth, or southwest.
No.
Yeah, kind of just south Ohio, southern Ohio. It's Ohio's kind of premier backpacking loop. It's like a 40-mile loop, and the race was on that loop plus some additional miles to get up to 50. It was actually a 53-mile race. And there was like 11,000 feet of vertical gain. So runners and backpackers know what vertical gain is, going up in elevation, then there's that same amount of feet going down in elevation. So it takes a toll on your knees and your quads doing all that running, hiking up and down those hills.
Yeah, going up cannot be fun.
Yeah.
But just when everybody thinks the climbing part's the tough part, but going down can be just as tough on your body.
There's loose rocks and roots, and you got to really be focused in on where your foot placement is. But that's where you can really make up some time if you're good on the downhills. So training for downhills is also important.
So I've talked to people that have run long distance races before, covering different sporting events, and people that were marathoners always talked about the point in the race when you just wanted to quit. Now that's 26 miles. Almost doubling that. How many points in that race did you want to quit?
Yeah, a lot. I think the difference is when you're an ultra runner, a lot of ultra runners are just out there for being outside and for the community. The ultra running community is awesome. There's so much, they're a lot different than road runners and marathon runners. A lot of those guys are out there for themselves to get their personal best every time, running hard. You know, on the ultra running scene, it's more chill and laid back, more of a community of friends and just hanging out. And you'll see people out there out of shape that you wouldn't think could even run a mile, and they'll walk the whole thing.
Really?
And they're just out there. They're using it to maybe try to get in shape or to challenge themselves personally, or just out there having a good time with their friends. So in an ultra race, you know, you're moving at a little slower pace. So I'm not know if you're familiar with, you know, a good mile time is on a racetrack. Maybe you know, you see these runners on tracks, they're out there running 4, 5, 6 minute miles. Right. You don't do that in an ultra race when you're out in the hills. You know, you're running maybe a 10, 12, 14 minute mile. You know, more of a, because you're mixing in some walking. You can't always run up these steep hills. Sometimes you're speed walking up the hills, and it really slows you down.
So what was your time on the 50-mile race?
I broke 50 mile, or I hit the 50-mile mark at about 11 hours and 55 minutes. My goal was to break 12 hours. But then I think the overall time was 12 and a half hours because it was a 53-mile race.
Oh, okay.
So
as if 50 wasn't enough.
Yeah, bonus miles.
So, you know, there's always that euphoria that runners talk about. There had to be how did you feel when you got done?
Oh, that's one of the reasons I do this. I was just actually telling one of my buddies at a 50K just a couple days ago. I ran one. I'll talk about that in a second. The pain and suffering that you're feeling, especially those final 5 or 10 miles, it's all worth it when you cross that finish line. When you see that finish line coming up and you hear people hooting and hollering and shaking those cowbells and blowing air horns or whatnot, you know, it is the greatest feeling. And the way you feel afterwards, like the euphoria. It's so fun to go through that finish line and to have those memories. Right. That's half the reason I do all this, because I'm creating so many great memories that I can think back on. And, you know, a lot of times during that race and FKTs, I question, why am I doing this? And I say to myself, and I've said to many of my followers, I will never do this again. And then you forget it, how bad it was, and you start missing it, and all of a sudden you find yourself training for the next one. It is the craziest thing. I can't explain it.
Well, and how long does it take your body to recover?
Well, I just ran a 50K race last Saturday. So what is this? This is Wednesday. So 5 days ago. And I took 1 day off, maybe 2. And then I started running yesterday, ran 4 miles, and then today I ran 8 miles, and I felt pretty good. Still just a little bit of soreness here and there in the knees, but when you're doing this every day, your body gets accustomed to it. And it helps you recover quicker. So that's the main thing. If you're out there wanting to do an ultra race or any kind of a long distance backpacking trip, it's the consistency of training and putting your knees and hips and feet and, you know, ligaments and tendons just through the ringer over and over and over. And they're eventually going to get used to it and be able to handle it.
I don't think my body would ever get used to 50 miles. In fact, I think that I would probably take a year to recover, if not the rest of my life. You've talked a couple times about your YouTube channels, and you shared it with me, and I got on there. 30,000 followers is pretty impressive for someone that's not selling anything. You know, so tell me a little bit about how you got into the YouTube thing and what that means for you.
So it all began in 2016. That's when I started my channel, and I brought a camera along with me on the Burr Oak State Park 22-mile loop down in southeast Ohio. And I had watched some other YouTubers film their adventures, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this. And just over the years, it kept growing and growing and growing, and more people follow me. And, you know, a lot of people are telling me they were inspired by seeing what I'm doing on the trail, and that's so cool to me to know that I've inspired others who haven't previously thought about going out and backpacking or running to get out there and try it themselves, or even those ones that maybe aren't physically able. They can kind of live vicariously through us YouTubers showcasing certain trails that they can kind of experience. So it kind of just grew from there, slowly but surely. But I do have to say, half of my subscribers came from 2 videos just this last year. So I I'm sure you're familiar with what shorts are. YouTube Shorts. Yeah. It's almost like YouTube's version of Reels, whatever. Right. I had one go to almost 11 million views, and then another one at 5 million.
What was the 11 million one?
How not to pick a pumpkin. I did it last fall, and I started it off with my shotgun, boom, and shot the stem off the pumpkin, and that thing just went crazy all over the world. And it got 11 million views. So my subscribers were just going through the roof during that. So if it wasn't for those 2 videos, the other one was a tractor getting stuck in the mud, a combine getting stuck in the mud maybe, or something like that. That one got like 5 million views. So between those 2 shorts alone, I got almost half my subscribers. So in a way, it almost feels like cheating. You know, in reality, I probably only have 15,000 followers that follow the backpacking and kayaking, a little bit of farming. So,
hey, in social media, there's no such thing as cheating.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about the followers. So for someone that hasn't been on there, just kind of explain, like, how long is it, and what would we see if we went out there? On your YouTube.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I would say my YouTube channel is kind of divided into 3 areas. Backpacking first and foremost, because that's how I got my start on YouTube. And then kayak camping. Not just kayaking. I usually don't put day trips on there of anything. Okay. It's always overnight stuff, extended trips, so people can see how I set up camp, how I find camp, how I cook my meals and prepare them while I'm out in the backcountry. So I think that's the draw to a lot of people that are trying to learn how to backpack. They want to see what kind of gear is he using, what's he eating out there, how does he decide where to go. So mainly backpacking, and probably another just as important as backpacking is kayak camping. That's really grown on my channel lately. People really like the kayak camping. I think there's probably more people that go backpacking than kayak camping, so it's a little more of a niche area, but a lot more people are wanting to experience kayak camping out on rivers or lakes and trying to learn how to do it.
Okay, so without everybody go to subscribe to Jason's channel first. I mean, but if they didn't, answer a couple of those questions you had. So how do you decide where to go, and what do you eat when you're out there?
Well, if you do go to my YouTube channel and subscribe, you can actually see on my latest video, I talk about the 4 things you need to navigate through to figure out how to go on the perfect kayak camping trip. So you can learn a lot right there, but I'll briefly explain. On a kayak camping trip, I often will find the river by, I know a river in another state that I want to learn about, and I'll scroll in on Google Earth and look at it really close and measure the distance. If there's not really any literature on it, I can see if there's portages or dams along it. I can find out if there's designated camping spots or campgrounds, or am I going to have to stealth camp or even illegally camp? You know, I don't condone that, and I don't ever want to do that, but sometimes you end up at a spot in the river and you have just forced to sleep on the bank of a river. You know? So you do what you have to do to make the trip successful. But that's the first thing I do. And then, to make it easy, you could just get dehydrated meals. Like, a lot of people know what Mountain House meals are. Or, you can go to your local Walmart and get a dehydrated meal, a freeze-dried meal. Right. And that makes your load really light, and especially for backpacking. But once you get into it a little bit more, and learn what you want on the trail, what you're craving, and how to cook it, you can bring a lot more elaborate meals. Like when I go kayak camping, I'll bring a lot of fresh produce from the farm. People like to watch me cook my sweet corn or cauliflower, zucchini, and I'll bring all kinds of good stuff and fry it up over the fire.
You said something about you got to be careful. Sometimes you end up staying on land that is privately owned, and that's become a big thing, especially out west. Is a lot of these privately owned lands. Ranches where people are hiking and stuff. So how much research is done to go into it before you take a trip to find out where the private versus public lands are?
Ohio's difficult because the landowners own to the center of the water, the center of the river. So if you camp on the sandbar or even on the bank on private land, you're trespassing. Now, for example, in South Carolina, it's above the high water mark. So that opens up sandbars and places along the banks that are legal because you're below the high water mark when it floods. So that makes it a lot easier. It's more conducive to kayak camp in other states versus Ohio, but Ohio does have some nice rivers that have city, county, and state parks, or dispersed camping, like if you were on a river in Wayne National Forest, for example.
Okay. So you've talked about the farm while we've been here, and your name's Jason Wish, but you are part of the Wishwell family farm. So talk a little bit about the role you play on the farm.
Sure. So I am the fourth generation on our family farm. We were dairy farmers until 2001. That's what I got my degree in, animal science with an emphasis in dairy at Ohio State. We sold that in 2001, and that's when I started doing the produce full time. I'd already been tinkering with growing sweet corn. Dad always planted a little patch of sweet corn, along the road of those field corn patches, and so I've always had sweet corn to pick growing up, and even through college. And then it kind of just took off in 2001. We started doing it full time. The dairy was gone, and we still grain farm a little over 1,000 acres. My dad and my younger brother primarily kind of run that part of the operation. It's kind of two separate entities right now. And I started the produce farm in 2001. That's when we did it full time. So 22 years now of raising sweet corn, tomatoes, and green beans, and melons, and zucchini, cucumbers, peppers, all that good stuff.
So how did growing up on a farm prepare you for doing all this?
Yeah, I was thinking about that today a little bit. I think it may have helped a little bit, or does help, because I'm on my feet so often. The kind of operation that I'm doing, I'm out walking a lot, checking greenhouses, in and out of box trucks and coolers, loading produce. So, I'm getting 10 or 15,000 steps, according to my watch, every day on the farm, and that adds up over time. That's a couple miles a day, and I'm not even starting my training yet. So, and it's hard physical work. The older I get, I try to get the younger kids that I hire to do most of that manual labor. I try to more of an overseer position, but manager position. But there's still a lot of hot, sweaty, heavy lifting days on a produce operation.
And I would guess that you've been outside pretty much your entire life. You've been probably a kid that's played in, barns and on farms, and so that love of the outdoors has to be another key reason.
Yeah, that's probably part of it. Growing up, if it was daylight and it was warm enough to be outside, even if it wasn't warm enough, we were still outside building forts in the snow. But we did all the things that farm kids do growing up. Building forts, riding motorcycles, climbing trees, and making obstacle courses in the haymow. Just all kinds of fun stuff. So I was always active and somewhat fit, and probably why I was a decent runner in 8th grade. Just coming straight from the farm into organized sport of cross country, and did pretty good.
Growing up, in the 70s and 80s, I know that our parents weren't afraid to throw us outside as soon as the sun came up, and I know on a farm it had to be the same way. Your mom didn't want you hanging out in the house anyway, so get outside and play.
Absolutely.
So you have a YouTube channel also about the farm, correct?
Oh yeah, I wanted to mention that. So I talked about backpacking and kayaking. The other facet now is the ultra running and FKTs, but it was also farming. But I felt that my channel was being divided in too many areas, and maybe I was alienating some of my subscribers that are following me just for the outdoor adventures. Okay. So we recently started a farm channel. Actually, it was bringing back to life the farm channel. It already existed. I just had it on private. So we're now loading weekly farm vlogs and things, how we grow things and harvest things on the farm weekly on the farm channel, and it's just called Wishwell Farms Produce.
That's pretty cool. So, we can get out there and just kind of see how to grow tomatoes like Wishwell Farms.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, probably not as good, but so we've just got a couple minutes left. Last kind of question for me is, what's the future hold for Jason?
Well, in the short term, it's making sure I spend plenty of time with those leisurely trips. I got one coming up with my wife. We're going to take my RV, and we're going to take almost a week for our 25th anniversary and stay at a bunch of different awesome places throughout Pennsylvania. Last year we did a different state. We try to go to a different state every year. So this year it's going to be Pennsylvania. Really looking forward to spending some time doing that. She'll be along with me with my dog, and we're going to relax and have a good time.
But Sheltowe's calling, right?
It is. It's in the back of my mind, and I got to make sure, if I don't have the support from friends and family, specifically my wife, it's not going to happen. So I gotta keep things in balance. It's got to be faith, family, and farm first, and then the backpacking and FKT adventures will come after that if they allow.
Well, Jason, it's been a pleasure. Follow him on his YouTube channel. A lot of great stuff to look at out there. It's been a real pleasure to get to talk to you, and the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.